with EnGenius Technologies. We'll go ahead and get started. So today the subject is our switch solutions, EnGenius switch solutions. So we'll be discussing our new switches that we have of 10 gigabit switches. So let's see. So what we'll do at the end, we'll save all your questions, and if you have any questions at the end, myself and Eddie Lee will try to answer any questions that you may have. Eddie Lee is also listening in, so he's a very good resource to have. So again, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, and or Eddie will try to answer them. So let's save those questions for last, and we'll try to get those covered. But what I'll cover today is we'll talk about 10 gigabit switch and our switches specifically and how they can be utilized, what features they have. We'll go into pricing and hardware. Then we'll talk about the industries that these switches could go into. And then we'll talk about the advantages and some of the promotions that we have running right now on switches. So with that said, I'll go ahead and begin. So revive your networks with 10 gigabit switching. There's really two areas that we look at in regards to these particular switches, and that's the obvious, I think, greater speed. The other is higher power. So in regards to greater speed, there's a lot of devices out there like NASs, routers, even access points, other switches and workstations that need faster speeds. These are 10 gigabit switches. There's two variances of that, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the specs of those particular switches. But greater speed is obviously one of the biggest things that you're looking for when you're looking at 10 gigabit switches for these individual devices. The other thing is higher power. We're seeing more and more devices out there that need to be supplied with higher power, PoE power, like PTZ cameras, even access points, lighting, digital signage, audio video controllers, and so on. So there's multiple devices that need higher power. So these two particular switches serve these two scenarios, greater speed and higher power. So 10 gigabit switches allow you to keep up with the demands of higher speeds with the same cabling. So devices like access points, you may or may not know, but EnGenius has 4 access points, and those Ethernet ports on those access points are 2.5 gig. Now they're not 10, but they're 2.5 gig. But there are other devices out there that do need higher support than 2.5 gig, anywhere from 5 to 10. It could be a NAS system, it could be another multi-gig switch or another 10 gigabit switch. It could be a particular workstation or a high-end router, or like I said, a Wi-Fi 6 access point. EnGenius has 4 access points that have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports on the back of those devices. There's the EWS 850 AP, which is a new 11AX or Wi-Fi 6 access point that has a 2.5 gigabit port on the back of that device. There's the EWS 377 access point that also supports 2.5. There's the ECW 230, which is a cloud managed access point, and a ECW 260, which is another outdoor 11AX or Wi-Fi 6 access point. All those access points support 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports on those particular devices, but there are other devices that need even further support, further than 2.5 gig or beyond 2.5 gig. So we're running into more situations where you need more speed for the individual devices that you're connecting to. So you want to keep that in mind when you're doing your multiple deployments. And this is part of the reason why you need 10 gigabit switches and multi-gig switches. The other side of that is higher power budgets per switch and per port are demanded as smart technologies in student housing, specifically condominiums, assisted living, and hotels are used. So as I mentioned, Wi-Fi 6 access points, AV controllers, video phones, like video phones, for example, need 60 watts of power. PTZ cameras can go anywhere from 60 on up. Digital signage is anywhere from 60 watts to 100 watts to power up a particular device. Lighting, door access systems. So you'll find door access systems and maybe condominiums or student housing. They need about 60 watts. There are thin clients. So all these devices need some sort of, or they need power, PoE. And these two variants of switches, or I should say this, of the two, one of those switches is a PoE switch, It can support up to 60 watts per port with a 420 watt PoE budget. So there's plenty of budget on there to support up to 4 devices that need 60 watts on a particular switch. So these are some of the devices that you would need to power up, or where you would need PoE++ in some installations. Utilize any of the 10 gigabit Ethernet ports to connect to other switches without running new cabling. You can actually use these switches to do backhauls. You can actually use the same cable. Even with Cat5e, you can get 10 gigabit up to 45 meters. With Cat6, you can get up to 55 meters on 10 gig, and Cat6a, you can get up to 10 gigabit up to 100 meters. So you can actually use these switches to backhaul to other switches, and you can use all 8 ports, or you can actually use the additional 2 ports, which are SFP module ports, but you can use Twinix to communicate on those extra 2 ports. So this is a really great value when you're trying to do backhauling and you do not want to use fiber. This is a great way to do it, going from one switch to another switch using basically the same cable, like a Cat5e, Cat6, or Cat6a, for example. So really great benefit to doing that type of installation. So these switches are what we call as hybrid switches. And hybrid switches help with decreasing administrative time through remote management, visibility, and troubleshooting. So all of our switches, all of our cloud switches are, you can manage them in multiple ways. The switches can actually act as a layer 2 multi-gig switch, 10 gig switch, or just a normal gig switch, and they can be deployed into any network. It does not have to be an EnGenius network. It doesn't have to be managed by EnGenius's cloud, for example, or on-premise management system. They can act as a normal switch in any environment. It could be a Cisco environment, it could be an HP environment, for example. These switches will go into those different scenarios, no problem. They do also work with our cloud system, and I'll show you what our cloud system looks like and what the switches look like within the cloud here in just a moment. But you can manage them through the cloud, and what that does is it improves the uptime system. You can look at system metrics, the analytics of the particular switch. There's really easy maintenance when you tie it to the cloud. There's auto firmware updates, for example. You can look at different logs. And to onboard these switches into a cloud scenario, you can quickly scan the QR code on the bottom of the device, or you can implement it through a serial number. And you can do provisioning and switch registration all through the cloud or through a friendly mobile app that we have available. And what I'll do is I'll actually show you what that looks like within the cloud system. So let me hop over to that system. So I'm just at engeniustech.com right now. What I'm going to do is go to the cloud interface, and that's cloud.engenius.ai. That takes me to a login screen. I can actually log in. I can create my login here, but I'm just going to log in. And I have multiple accounts. We'll go into my master account or my business account. Let's log in. So right now I'm logged into my personal account, and you can see I have 2 switches and some other devices like access points, and I can see my clients within the cloud. But let me click on the switch section. So I have 2 switches. I have a 8-port gigabit switch, and I have our new 10 gigabit switch that is tied to the cloud. Like I said, this can either be tied to the cloud, or it can be managed through SNMP, for example, or on your existing network. It does not have to be tied to the cloud, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it looked like within the cloud when it's configured or when it's up and running within the cloud. So I'm looking at the switch list right now. If I just expand this view, I can easily expand this view, and I can see what ports are up and running. I can see what VLANs are set up, and I can see if I'm supplying some sort of power and what things are configured within the switch at a high level. It gives me a really good view, and I can start to compare my other switches within my network in the cloud when it's tied to the cloud. So it gives you a lot of management capabilities within the cloud. You'll notice that each of the ports, it'll show you if they're active or not. And if they're active, it will tell you the link rate or the negotiation rate. So for example, this particular color is indicating that I'm connected at 1 gigabit, and it's connected to a gigabit switch. So that's accurate. You'll also notice that it is flashing an arrow. The arrow means it's uplink, and that's the port that's going back to the internet, basically. So you can see what speeds are being negotiated at each port, and we're going anywhere from 100 megabits all the way up to a gig, 2.5, 5, and 10, or if it's just simply disconnected or disabled, for example, because you can go in and you can disable individual ports of this particular switch. This is true for all cloud switches. This is, and for the 2 switches that we're talking about today, I can see if there's uplink ports that are connected, for example. And so I can even dig down a little bit deeper and go to the details page. And now I'm looking at the individual switch and diving in deeper. I named this 10 gig switch just to give you an example, but it gives me some great high level view of the switch at the top. I can show you topology view. If I just click here, I'll show you that in another screen. But I can look at the summary, if it's statically configured, DHCP, what VLANs are set up. I can even take a photo of the switch to identify, okay, this is in conference room A, for example. Again, I can look at my ports. This is great for troubleshooting. Eddie and I recently used this with a case that somebody was reporting slow speeds on an access point, and we figured out that they ran the wrong cabling and they were only getting 100 megabits on that particular port, and it indicated that with the color. So you could use that for troubleshooting. We've used that in real installations and things, and so it's a great tool. I can look at the system settings, and again, we're looking at the specific switch that I'm in right now. I can look at port settings. I can go to particular ports. I can highlight the port, say for example, port 2. I can go to configure, and then I can configure individual things within the port. I can disable the port, enable the port. If I disable the port, if it's supplying power, I'm basically powering that end device down and powering it back up. So there's some things I can do within the individual ports, and they can all be configured in individual ways, for example. I can do mirroring, link aggregation, and I can look at logs, if there are any logs. And there's some logs that I have today because I just threw this switch up today just for this today's demonstration. The other thing I'll point you to is what CPU usage is happening and what memory use is happening on this particular switch. And we can do this for all devices tied to the cloud. This is the individual switch. What I also wanted to show you within the cloud interface really quick, switch settings. I can do mass configurations across multiple switches at one time, and then I can go back to this particular view and do individual configurations on switches. So just to give you an idea, I can do mass configurations and then I can do individual configurations. The other thing I would like to show you is if I go to topology view, it will give me a topology of my particular network. And so right now I'm running a small 8-port, and I connected it to my 10 gigabit switch. And it just gives me some general information, quick information about the ports that they're connected to, for example, at what speed, and multiple things when I just highlight these individual things. And so I just want to give you a quick overview of what you can do within the cloud when you use it in cloud. Obviously, you can use this as a standalone switch or an autonomous mode. Basically, it's working as just a layer 2 gigabit switch. You can log into the interface, and you have tons and tons of layer 2 features within there, layer 2 plus features within the switch that you can access and configure. But you could also tie it to the cloud. Let's discuss pricing and hardware. So within the 10 gigabit switch versions that we have 2 versions, and we'll come out with more versions here shortly this year. The first one is the ECS 5512. It's an MSRP price of $899. This is a 10 gigabit 8-port switch. It has 4 SFP plus slots. So every port supports 10 gigabit, whereas some of the competitors, it might be the first one or the first 2. All ports support up to 10 gigabits on all 8 ports, and then we can support up to 10 gigabits on the SFP module side of things. The ECS 5512FP is, the MSRP is 1,199. Again, this is 10 gigabits on every port, SFP plus, so 10 gigabits per port here via fiber. And this is PoE plus, and you can supply up to 60 watts per port. And you have 420 watts of power, PoE budget, to use to power up those devices like a PTZ camera, lighting, door access control, video phone, and so on. So you have that ability to do with this switch, and or 802.3 AT or PoE plus Wi-Fi 6 Wi-Fi 6 access points, for example. To get a little more granular, these two 10 gigabit switches, the only differences between these two switches is one is supplying PoE, the one is a non-PoE switch. It's a full-featured layer 2 plus switch. It does support 100, 1000, 2.5 gig, 5 gig, 10 gig on each of those ports. As I mentioned, the one particular switch, the 5512FP, which means full power, is providing up to 420 watts of PoE budget. And PoE++ can be applied to any of the ports, not the first 4, but any of the 8 that you choose for convenience. Both of these switches have 240 gigabits of switching capacity. Both have 4 dual-speed 10 gigabit SFP plus uplink ports, and you have all your switching layer 2 switch features that you would find with our other layer 2 switches, like access control, IGMP, LED, link aggregation, mirroring, spanning tree, voice VLAN, advanced QoS, energy efficient Ethernet. Eddie, anything you would add to that that I may have missed in regards to the granular spec side of things?
No, I think that's all we support, but yeah, that's pretty much it. You cover.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is basically a high level. Obviously, you'll find spec information on our data sheets and or the product landing page, or the product page we call it, where these individual devices, you can find the spec information of the individual switches and or the data sheets for these particular switches. But by all means, feel free to reach out to me personally, and I can try to answer any questions that you have. Now, these 10 gigabit switches fall in line with a whole list of other switches. We have 2 multi-gig switches, which are 2.5 gigs per port. And the PoE version also supports PoE++. I actually have a couple customers now that are utilizing these within homes. The switching fabric is all 2.5 gig. So we do have a couple customers that are utilizing these already. I will talk about availability in just a moment. But then we have other versions of PoE and non-PoE switches, anywhere from a 48 port to a 24 port. And then we have 2 8-port switches, both supplying PoE. These particular switches do not supply PoE, but you can see that the MSRP pricing is very well priced within the market and for the feature set that you're getting. The thing I would really highlight is that these can be managed individually, like I said, in any network. It doesn't have to be an EnGenius managed network, or you have the choice of going to the EnGenius cloud and managing within the EnGenius cloud, or our on-premise management systems like EasyMaster, for example. So these devices can be managed in multiple ways, and that's why we call them hybrid switches. Let's talk about where these particular switches would go into, for example. So current installations, applications that we go into are MDUs or student housings and apartments and condos, specifically deployed near the edge. Some are going into kind of the core infrastructure, depends on the scenario. Residential care or assisted living, hospitality, resorts and hotels, and education. This is where we see a lot of these devices or these switches being used, specifically multi-gig right now. We know that there is a need for multi-gig mainly in student housing, in MDU scenarios, and some hospitality and education. But also we see that falling in with the 10 gigabit falling into the same verticals, basically. So currently, right now, we're working with multiple multi-dwelling units, specifically in the condominiums and apartments, where they need more bandwidth at near the end of the, or closer to the edge. So supplying more power and more speed in those individual cases or verticals. So let's talk about basically the takeaways, the advantages, and some of the promotions that we're currently running. So some of the takeaways I would mention is for these two particular switches, the ECS 5512, the ECS 5512FP, both have 240 gigabit switching capacity. You're getting 10 gigabits on all 8 ports, not just on 2 or half of them, on all. The PoE version is supplying PoE++, which is 802.3 BT, also supports AT and AF. They're all compliant, so they're going to power up compliant devices like a voice over IP phone, for example, all the way up to a PTZ camera or a thin client, for example. So they are compliant and providing compliant PoE. You're getting up to 60 watts per port on the FP version, the ECS 5512 FP version. So you're getting that extra power per port, and that's on every port. You just, your limitation is on the budget, which is a pretty big budget. You're getting 420 watts of PoE budget. So if you're not really utilizing the 60 watts and you're using maybe 30 watts or less, you can use every port in that particular case to power up devices, so you know. But if you're maxing out at 60 watts for 4 devices, then you have 4 devices that you can choose any port and power up those particular devices. You have 4 dual speed 10 gigabit SFP plus uplink ports. Majority of our switches are now coming with 10 gigabit or SFP plus ports now. So you'll see as we roll out new switches, more and more will come with 10 gig. We'll start to move into more port densities with 10 gigabit. So you'll see the SFP turn into 40 gig. So all of our switches, or most of our switches, I should say, are supporting 10 gig. There are some versions that support 1 gig, but you'll start to see more and more with 40 gig, 10 gig. Again, these switches have multiple management options, and I'm trying to beat this into everybody's head, and I apologize, but there's multiple ways of managing these devices. You do not have to use the EnGenius Cloud to do that. You don't have to use EnGenius's on-premises management system to manage these devices. It can be done through SNMP versions 1, 2, and 3. It can be deployed in any environment. You don't have to use it in an EnGenius environment. It can be deployed in any environment. And those are some of the advantages that we talk about when we're talking about these particular switches. Now, sales and support I'll talk about pretty quickly. We have multiple sales people on our team. There's John, Clady, and Jim, and David, and they're responsible for territories. If you do have questions about these particular switches or any promotions that I'll talk about on the next couple slides, these are the individuals that you will want to take a snapshot of this screen. These are your points of contact. You may have talked to some of our business development managers like Paul, Mike, and or Doug. But these are the individuals these are your points of contact depending on your territory or where you reside, where your company resides. They can answer all your questions, help you with deployment, installation, and any questions about our on-premise management systems or cloud management systems and these 2 particular switches that we're talking about. And so this is a great resource. These people are a great resource to you, and they have access to customer service, RMA departments, product line management, engineering, software engineering, hardware engineering. So this is a really, really great resource. So if you want to take a snapshot, that's probably a good thing to do right now. And we'll share this also, this webinar, so you'll have that information. Let's talk about some promotions that we're running right now. This is a new promotion. Now this is going to be dependent on the your distribution partner, but they're basically, the promotions are the same. This is running on two new switches that we have, two gigabit switches, the ECS 1552 and the ECS 1528. This is a 48 port gigabit switch. It's a non-PoE switch. When you buy one of these switches, you get a switch for free, the same model. If you buy the 24 port, you're getting another 24 port for free. There are 48 port gigabit switches. They have the 4 10 gig SFP plus ports on both. This is a 24 port. So this promotion has started. I think it started yesterday. It's been I think it's been loaded into all of our cloud partner distributors. And so you'll see different variances of the promotion, but it's basically the same value. So be sure to take advantage of this if you're interested in this particular promotion. So this is running right now. And if you talk to a salesperson at distribution and are not aware of it, try to make them aware of it. But I would then go back and talk to your representative at EnGenius, and they'll be able to fill you in on the details if you need more details. We're also running, EnGenius has SFP modules. We're running promotions on the SFP modules. Anytime you buy a cloud switch, you can buy our SFP modules at half the price. And so we have different variations. We have 3 SFP modules that we currently have with different specs, obviously, that you can buy at 50% off. So any EnGenius cloud switch that you purchase, you can get 50% off on the SFP module. Now you may ask, can I take advantage of this promotion and also take advantage of this promotion? And the answer is yes. When you buy the one 48 port, as an example, switch, you can buy up to 8 SFP modules because you have 4 ports. So we're allowing you to buy up to 4 SFP modules at 50% off, and or up to 8, I should say. And the reason I'm saying that is because you want 4 for this end and 4 for the other end. So you can buy basically up to 8 SFP modules at 50% off on the one that you purchase. On the free unit, you can't buy another 8 on top of that. Hopefully that makes sense. But yes, you can take advantage of both of these promotions. And I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about today. That puts me right about 30 minutes. So hopefully this webinar was very helpful. And if you have any questions, I'm free to answer any questions that you may have, and or if Eddie might be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, but thanks, Brian. So Brian, I see there's one question regarding the QoS, so I can talk about a little bit.
Okay.
So the QoS, as you may know, there are 2 kind of trust mode of the QoS, right? One is called COS, is class of service, which is L2.1p, I think, which allow the user to kind of specify the priority of data packet when traffic is buffered in the switch. And there's another, we also support another called DSCP. DSCP stands for Differentiated Service Code Point. So on the QoS section, you can set up the DSCP, which allow to detect the packet based on the DSCP value you put in. So that both COS and DSCP is on the QoS. For the advanced QoS, you can find from our switch. It's on the QoS advanced mode. You can find the class mapping. So the class mapping is kind of like class. You can put the class policy into the advanced QoS, and you can put the source managers, destination managers, all the VLAN ID, VLAN priority. You can put into the class policy. And in addition to the class mapping, we also have the bandwidth control and store control. I think Brian also mentioned that the bandwidth control and store control is per port based. So basically, bandwidth control allow you to just you enable the port, and you can enable the ingress packet, right? and what's the ingress rate is you want to put, and what's the ingress rate you want to put. That's the bandwidth control, and also we support store control. Basically, still on the port base, so allow you to control the broadcast or even unknown multicast and unknown unicast to make sure all the port is under control. So I think that's the QoS I want to share with everybody.
That's great. Thanks, Eddie.
Hope that answers your question. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, the other question is, can I configure a switch and then tie it to the cloud? You can. The cloud will overwrite the configurations that you have. So if you plan on putting it on the cloud, I say that you start by using it on the cloud. You don't configure and then put it on the cloud. The logic with the cloud is that it will currently override any configurations that you may have on the switch if you take that route. So that's a question that we get a lot. So you just want to be aware of that. So if you're going to use the cloud, I would just tie it to the cloud from the beginning. If you're going to use it as just a standalone switch within a different network, then that's fine too. You can just configure it locally without any problem. So any other questions that you may have in regards to switches or anything else? You have Eddie and I's attention, so if you have any more questions about that. The other thing I would point to really quick is within the cloud, if you're using cloud right now, you have this intercom button. Please utilize the intercom button. Eddie and myself and other team members try to respond to questions. This is basically a chat area. If you didn't see where I did that, if when you're logged into your cloud account, if you click this little icon, which is called intercom, you can ask questions here. You can actually invite us in with generating a passcode. Just allow us a little time to respond. You are getting support from the product line management team, from our sales engineering team. You also are getting support from our hardware engineers and our software engineers. And if there's features that you wish to see on the switches and or other devices within the cloud, this is a really great area to utilize because we are hearing firsthand requests from customers to the whole team, and it's great feedback, and we appreciate it very much. So if you do have questions and or feature requests, they can answer here, or just help just in general. You can do that through the intercom system. And again, if you click on that little ticket really quick, let me show you that again. There's a little ticket that shows up here. Looks like a ticket. Click there. You can generate a passcode for different time frames. Generate that passcode, throw that into the chat box, and then you're basically inviting the EnGenius team in to view your account or view your networks and or your switch questions or switch configuration questions, and we can help you there. So just wanted to throw that out there really quick, along with the support from our sales team. So again, I'll share that screen one more time so you have contact with these individuals. This is your way in and your point of contact for EnGenius. So if there are no other questions, I will go ahead and end it there. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I appreciate your time. Hopefully there was some really good, valuable information that I shared with you and Eddie's answer. Let me see really quick. Is there anything else added? I think that was it. I appreciate your time and have a very good week. If we don't talk to you soon, we'll talk to you later. Thank you.